Should turn red, the light. The light turns red.
It's intermittent.
Is there a red? Yeah, there's a red light.
Okay.
Okay, right, now we're going to start going in more detail. And what I'm trying to get across is you can actually work all of this stuff out by first principles. Hence, it's self-evident. Hence, the knowing, right? So, under the court's own rules of evidence, okay, until somebody can bring the Creator into a court to give first-hand testimony, which is cross-examinable, that any individual or group of individuals can impose their will on any other individual or groups of individuals, things are self-evident in logic and reason.
Did you just say that again?
Any individual, under the rules of evidence in a court, it's all based on testimony. All testimony is cross-examinable to ensure the veracity of it. So for instance, people talk about affidavits and they think that affidavits are it. When it goes to a court, even an affidavit is open to cross-examination to establish the truth. Okay? So, under the court's rules, that is expressed in what they call testimony, i.e., it's the person that is doing the act of creating into the reality. My words are creating, making a claim by a statement. Every statement's a claim. And you have the right of cross-examination to establish the truth of it. So, what we're knowing is that it doesn't matter what your belief system is, your social conditioned belief system is, somehow there must be an explanation as to how we physically have this reality. So whatever that belief is to anybody, it can be religious, it can be Big Bang, it can be this, it can be that, it doesn't matter. Whatever that belief is, it's your personal belief. So bring the Creator or creation to give first-hand testimony that I can impose my will on anybody I like. That is open to cross-examination for truth. So that's the foundation of the self-evident truths. So until somebody can do that, it can't be proven that somebody has the right to impose their will on another. So basically, what can we deduce from that applying logic and reason? We're all entitled to an equal share of this amazing planet. Okay? And all are equal under the law. What does that mean? What one can do, all can do. Nobody is above the law. What does that mean? We are all accountable for harm that we cause. And no one can impose their will on any other, i.e., we cannot knowingly harm another, and that there is the foundation of a breach of peace. That is the definition of a breach of peace. It's self-evident that nobody can impose their will. Therefore, okay? And also, nobody can knowingly cause the Creator's creations harm, i.e., we must apply the best available knowledge so that we don't knowingly cause creation harm. This isn't our property. We didn't make it. Okay? Therefore, we are trustees. We must accept that responsibility as trustees. We are trustees for future generations, and we are beneficiaries of the seasonal fruits whilst we're here. So we have a dual role with this. Yes, Ran?
How do you, like hunting for food goes against that principle?
It doesn't, because that's a right of survival. We'll get onto that. You've got to do what you need to survive, okay?
But it means that's not an absolute rule, because...
No, it isn't absolute rule. Because if you don't, okay, forage, then you
I'm
will
talking about,
die.
say, hunting animals.
Hunting animals, the
Kill
same,
an animal.
the same goes for plants. The same goes for plants. Okay, there's loads of experiments to show that plants have feelings.
Yeah.
It's not just animals that have feelings. So to say that on ethical grounds I'm a vegetarian is utter nonsense. You're quite happy to kill a plant.
Yeah.
Okay, so
No, I'm not distinguishing animals in parts.
Yeah.
I'm saying you are technically you're killing something or destroying something. So
yes, you are
really-
destroying something, but if you don't destroy something, you will not survive.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Therefore, under the rights of survival, okay, however, if you go and kill more than you need, that's a different thing to killing what you need to survive. Okay? And so in Kuwait and under Islam, you can steal for survival. But as soon as you steal beyond survival, your hand gets chopped off. Okay? So these principles are rational, the way that they've been established. Right, let's see if this, oops, yeah, cool, nice, whoops. Yeah. Okay, let's just go home again. Okay, so you're going to have to do it like this. So, based upon that, okay, when we talk about law in terms of the courts, what are we talking about? We're all familiar with the laws of nature, so here's gravity, okay.
Question.
Density.
Yeah. Okay. We can use different names, but what is law? If I let go of this, okay, it's going to end up down there. Okay, what we want to call it doesn't matter. All right. But so that's what I would describe as natural law. So here's another example of natural law. Okay. So once something's in motion, once there's something to oppose it, that motion stops. So to equate this, when we talk about laws, we're talking about something which gives a predictable outcome. So a certain set of inputs gives a predictable outcome. And so the conscience is what connects all of us. All right? It doesn't matter where you're from. We know and can distinguish right from wrong. That's what we feel. All right? And when we are wrong, then that sets off a chain reaction. It could be retribution, it could be all sorts of things. Okay, karma, what goes around comes around, yin, yang, whatever. It's expressed in so many different ways. And hence, in equity, what they say, the rule of equity, it's not laws, okay, it's rules, it's principles of law. So equity will not suffer a wrong without a remedy. So if I wrong somebody, they feel they've been wronged, that is going to set off a chain reaction if I don't remedy it. I don't know how or when that chain reaction is going to come. Okay? And hence, we need to resolve disputes. Otherwise, there'll be a breach of peace. So, law is about duties, rights, and obligations. And like I said earlier, these can be either expressed, they can be verbal, they can be written, or they can be expectations which arise out of customs. So we have an expected interaction, or the way we're going to interact with one another. So when we're talking about law in courts, we're talking about duties, rights, and obligations. Okay? Because nobody can impose their will under the court's rules on any other, that means every interaction must be consensual. There needs to be a meeting of the minds as to the parties' respective duties, rights, and obligations. And you consent to bind yourself to them. And the Oaths Act 1978 confirms this. So it's legislatively confirmed. You bind yourself through your words, either verbally or written. And it includes that it's the intent behind that binding. So people talk about, oh, the Queen never was coronated properly because she wasn't sitting on a stone. Okay, or she signed at the top of the page instead of the bottom of the page. The Oath Act 78 makes it absolutely clear. It's the intent. Did I intend to bind myself? So this is what you call in equity. Equity is about substance. What was the intent behind the action, as opposed to the form or format. Were you sitting on a stone when you did it? Does it matter if you're sitting on a stone when you choose to bind yourself? No, of course it doesn't. It's, do I intend to bind myself? Okay? So if I cross my fingers, you know, behind my back, I am committing fraud because there's not a meeting of the minds. My intent is not to stick by my word. Therefore, if there's not a meeting of the minds, there can be no contract, which is basic contract law. Absolute basic. Okay?
And you don't, I mean, you've always kind of said that, for instance, if you take a contract out with someone,
Yeah.
and pretty much all of the contracts, their terms and conditions pretty much mean all the same in terms of, I don't know, energy companies or whoever.
Yeah.
So let's say I read the energy companies, I really scrutinise the whole thing, and I just decide to draw a pen through the parts that I disagree with,
Yeah.
and I send it back to them. And they say to me, if you don't accept our terms and conditions, we're not going to take your custom.
Yeah.
So,
That's your,
and they're discriminating against me because ultimately I just don't accept their terms and conditions.
yeah.
But what choice do I have? So then what?
You have no choice. Hence, you need to go back to equity.
Then what
Is
choice
there
did the
fair
Queen have
consideration?
in respect of the rules that she followed? She didn't have a choice either because those rules have been laid out in front of her. So if she decided, well, I don't want to say that, and cross that out, cross that out, cross that out, she would become Queen.
So actually, it happened, okay, because the Coronation Oath 1688 has different wording to what the Queen actually said when she was coronated. Okay, and we'll look at the coronation. Basically, it's three things that everything is pinned upon: the Bill of Rights, the Coronation Act, and the Act of Settlement. Okay, that there's the constituting authority to govern. So the Coronation Oath Act, basically, Parliament expressed its intent in the exact wording, the form. However, the rules of equity prevail, and therefore, so long as that form, the intent behind that form was expressed, whether the same words as are written there or different words which express the same intent, it's fine. There's not a problem with it. With the energy companies, what you've got is somebody is imposing their will by not acting fairly. For a meeting of the minds, okay, there needs to be a meeting of the minds. Both parties need to understand. What I've communicated, is it understood as I intended to communicate it, yes or no? If it hasn't, there's not been a meeting of the minds, and therefore it's not a valid contract.
Yeah.
Okay. However, what they're saying to you is, unless you submit to our conditions, okay, now that there is a very different story, because for a contract to be valid, there needs to be equal consideration. Okay, so are your terms and conditions fair and just? If they're not fair and just, it's not an enforceable contract. And because the rules of equity prevail, okay, that's the law, the highest enforceable law is the rules of equity. They prevail, so you have to argue on that. I have no choice but to get electricity or gas from these bunch of dudes. The question becomes is there equal consideration for it? Or is somebody taking advantage of a position, of a privilege which is granted?
So Mark, from a practical point of view, you've got that situation.
Yeah.
How does the utility company prove they own that natural resource?
It can't. It
So-
can't own it. Nobody can own anything.
So
We are
that-
trustees.
Right, so then how can they then compel you?
Because and again, I'm quite happy to go down these sort of things. What is common law? Most people don't realise or understand what common law is. Common law actually is the set of precedents to settle property claims. Okay? So, through the common law over the centuries, it was basically in the Norman invasion that the common law was introduced to England. And what happened was, the whole property ownership changed from communal to private through claims which were enforced through violence. So what's happened is you've got all of the property under the common law setup. However, as we'll see, the rules of equity prevail. So therefore, it's not fair and just what's happening on the common law, and you argue what's called lawful excuse from the existing common law precedent using the rules of equity. So the argument goes like this with property. Can you prove, okay, let's say the water companies own the land which collects the water and the reservoir, and they depreciate that over time through the accounting. So the question quite simply is, prove that you own the land. Where is the deed from creation that you have a right to own the land? They can't provide that. Therefore, you shouldn't be paying anything towards that. So if we look at gas, it's probably the easiest example. With gas, we all equal shareholders in global resources. Okay, we all have an equal entitlement to our fair share of global resources. Therefore, we are all entitled to gas to heat our house. So anything, there can be no charge for the physical resource, the gas, and there can be no profit element. The only thing that we need to pay is the creation of another person, i.e. their labour. So in essence, when challenging the utilities, people need to go to the accounts, take out what they have no lawful right to, because we all have an equal right to gas. And so, unfortunately, people aren't looking at this aspect of it. So what they're saying is, oh, gas is free, I'm entitled to it. Sorry, no. It's free if you go and dig the hole and go and get it out and process it and carry it to your house. Yeah, you have every right to do that. But if somebody else is doing that, you need to pay them for their labour. Okay, and in the Quran, I'm sure it's in the Bible somewhere as well, it says, you must pay a man for the labour before the sweat on their back dries. Okay, so this concept, we create by, through our labour, we don't create anything, we actually transmute something that's existing into something else. So we take sand, cement and water, we mix it all together, and now we've got concrete. Did we make the sand, cement or water? No. All we've done is applied our knowledge through our skills, our labour, to transmute something from one thing into something else. Okay? I don't know if that sort of answers it, but in essence that's the core that it needs to go back down to. Okay, so then with that, the important thing is it's about duties, rights and obligations, and when I show you the common law you'll see how this fits in. These self-evident truths through logic and reason are actually written into the common law, and a lot of them are even legislatively affirmed. Okay? Now, this thing about common law precedent. So if we summarize basically the rape and pillage of the land from the people, okay? Right. Are you happy to do this non-disclosure agreement, okay, for your little piece of land here, and I'll give you over the other side of the country 10 times as much, and it's much nicer, and it's got rain, more rain, and blah, 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 blah. But in exchange, in the courts and the judge, I need you to say X, Y, Z. Okay? So long as you agree, you bugger off, you've got something else, I've bribed you, but now I have a judgment from the courts. And then I can go up and say, ha! See what happened to her? Okay, see what happened? See what happened? And that there is essentially, in summary, very simplified, how the land was stolen from the people. That there still today happens. Okay? So with the anti-fracking stuff, INEOS tried to bribe somebody on the same basis. Unfortunately, Joe Boyd was on the ball. He turned up in court on the day and stopped that. What INEOS were trying to do is say, okay, if this is the field where we got our works, and here's the public road, we're going to make a little pig pen here for the people behind the hedge, and you guys can scream and shout all you like in there. Okay, that's the injunction INEOS were trying to get. Okay, gee, wow, that's really good. Great, thanks, I've got this pig pen. Nobody can see my banners from the road. Okay, what good is that? And Joe Boyd alone stopped that. Okay, so, and that there is a recent example of how the law is created. So we need to balance this. Once that law is created, okay, you've got a precedent. What you've done is, based upon the kiddies that are arguing in front of the judge, okay, a precedent has been set to resolve this type of dispute. Therefore, when there's the same set of facts, the court doesn't need to waste its time reinventing the wheel. They just apply the same facts to other issues of the same thing. So what happens then is, you need to go to a higher court to overrule that precedent. So it becomes more and more difficult. So if bad law is set in the courts, it gets more and more difficult and more expensive to actually correct that. But we use the rules of equity to argue lawful excuse from it. So the idea of common law precedent, can you write down not CET for precedent? Is that you don't waste public resources by reinventing the wheel every time. We've got the knowledge, we've learned from it, this is how we've decided to deal with it. But when better knowledge comes available, the rules of equity, then we create a new higher truth. Therefore, the highest unrebutted truth, unrebutted claim, stands as truth. This is the principle behind the highest unrebutted claim stands as truth. That's where it comes from. So that there is the way that this ties together. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every time by arguing the same set of facts. When there's something new, then we create a new higher truth. So the highest unrebutted claim stands as truth, as law, is the way that it is. Oops. Right, now, okay, so what is the right of survival? We already started talking about this. The right of survival essentially is creation, whatever it is, okay, gave us a mind, and creation takes control of your mind, and you're familiar with the fight or flight response. I.e., creation takes over your mind to do whatever your mind needs to do to control your body to survive. Okay? So basically, the creator or creation retains authority over your body, and therefore survival or self-defense is always lawful excuse. Okay? And now, basically, in law, it is only you can know what's in your head. It's not up to what somebody else's opinion is, because they weren't in the same circumstances, and they weren't under the same social condition belief system. We are all unique. Therefore, this question of self-defense isn't a matter for a judge to decide. It's sort of a reasonable person as reflected by a jury. So long as you have an honest belief that you're under imminent attack, that there becomes a question of jury as to whether your belief was honest or dishonest. Let me just try and get this mouse in the right place. So what we've got is, what do we need to survive? Basically, we need shelter from the environment, we need food, we need water, we need air. Nobody has the right to deny us any of that. If they deny us the right to any of that, they've created an obligation upon themselves because they've removed your right. Okay? So, somebody asked about planning permission earlier. We each are responsible adults, or supposed to be. If I have a piece of land and I choose to build my shelter on there, nobody else, so long as I'm applying the best available knowledge, nobody else can tell me I can't build a shelter on there. If they do, they deny me the right of providing for yourself. Therefore, they've now created an obligation on themselves to provide you something equally good. So, if they deny you planning permission anywhere, quite simply, right, you've denied me my right to shelter, and unless you can bring the Creator into court to say that you have the right to deny me the right to shelter, you now have created an obligation upon yourself to provide me the equivalent of what I could have done myself. Okay? So, and the same goes with air, water, food. So once we've met our rights of survival, then it goes into rationality. So basically, what's the difference between murder and manslaughter? One is in essence a self-defense, i.e. my mind is not under my control, it's under the Creator's control, therefore I can't be held liable for it, as opposed to if I intend and premeditate something. Okay? Now, what the Creator did was also given us these things called eyes, nose, mouth, ears, feeling, okay, and a brain. And that there allows us to observe and apply logic and reason. So beyond the rights of survival, law is about rationality. So what other rights are there? Whoops, and can we derive from this? We have the freedom of association. We can pick and choose who we interact with. Why? This actually is, if we can't, in essence, can dictate the end of the human race. And nobody has the right to do that. So you have the right of freedom of association. You have the right of freedom of speech. So what is freedom of speech? Now, some people have been talking about this earlier. Freedom of speech is when somebody makes a statement, you have the right to question that statement. Okay? But it's not about attacking a personality. So freedom of speech is about principles as opposed to personalities. Okay? So that's the distinction between freedom of speech. So you have the right for that. Why? Because your thoughts need to be put in a way of expressing them with your words so that you can make sure your message is understood as intended. So the only way you can learn that is through expression. So, like I said, what happened, Jane helped me translate what was in my head into the Peacekeeper course. I had all these thoughts in there, and to try and bring them into an effective way of communicating them, that there is only through the freedom of speech that's attainable. The other thing that's not spoken about is knowledge left from generations past. At the moment, the way things are moving, basically intellectual property rights. What they're doing is putting intellectual property rights into companies. Can a company do anything or know anything? No, it can't. Okay? And with that, it's clear that all of that is utter nonsense when we look at substance. It's only people that have knowledge. All right? And therefore, the question becomes, when the person dies, what happens with that knowledge? And again, until somebody can bring in that some fiction of law can retain rights for something it didn't create. A company didn't create the knowledge. It's the people that were working there. Okay? When those people die, it automatically becomes everybody's right to be able to apply that best available knowledge. In fact, it's an obligation so that we don't knowingly cause any other creation harm. So this is another massive thing which needs to be tackled. Okay, the next thing then is your body. What are the rights associated with that? So basically, your mind controls your body. And therefore, as nobody can impose their will on me or anybody else, what I do with my body is my business and none of your business. What I choose to put in it, what I choose to do with it, is none of your business. Okay? Now, what's happening at the moment is they're trying to remove these individual rights and impose this thing, not the common good, but I can't remember what wording they use. What they're trying to say is, oh no, we can, as a community, impose our will on you as the individual. Sorry, you can't. Okay? Unless you can bring the creator into a court to verify that you have that right to impose your will on me. You have no right to tell me what to do with my body. So if you want to smoke weed, or do what the hell you like, or do this, or do that, or enslave yourself, or whatever, that's your personal choice. So nobody can tell you what to do or not what to do. It's not limited to the decisions or reasoning of what anybody else believes. A person is not to be treated as basically an incompetent or unable to make a decision because somebody else thinks they know better. Now, this here, guess what, is enshrined in law. You have the absolute right over your body. So what the hell is going on with this COVID nonsense or anything else like that? Okay? Now, specifically in regards to medical advice, there's a judgment, Montgomery versus Lanarkshire Health Board, which expresses what is informed consent, what constitutes the word informed consent. And informed consent is basically the quantified risks need to be established and the quantified benefits need to be established. Okay? i.e. the effectiveness and consequences of any medical treatment. Before you can consent to something, there needs to be a meeting of minds. I need to understand what are the risks and what are the rewards, and you need to tell me, and if you can't tell me, I can't make an informed decision.